My girlfriend sat me down on the couch, muted the TV, and looked me dead in the eye. She told me she liked me, but wasn't in love with me. She thought she was just changing her relationship status. What she didn't realize is that she was activating a termination clause in a contract she didn't even know existed. She downgraded me from a boyfriend to a roommate. So I decided to become the most ruthlessly efficient roommate she could ever imagine. We were sprawled on the couch, the ambient noise of some forgettable reality show filling the comfortable silence between us. It was a typical Tuesday night, a perfectly mundane data point in the 2-year-long system of our life together. I felt the familiar pull of sleep and decided to close out the day's processes. I leaned over to kiss my girlfriend, Chloe, a routine I'd executed every night. "Good night," I murmured against her hair. "I love you." The words were automatic, a system check that always returned a positive response. But not tonight. The expected reply, the reciprocal "I love you too," never came. The silence that followed was deafening, a critical error message flashing in the quiet of our living room. I pulled back and saw her face. The easygoing expression was gone, replaced by a strange, unreadable seriousness. Her eyes were fixed on me, but it felt like she was looking at a schematic, analyzing a component she was about to replace. She reached for the remote, her movements deliberate, and muted the television. The sudden absence of sound amplified the tension in the room tenfold. She turned her body to face me fully, and my stomach performed a nauseating little inversion. This wasn't a casual, "What should we have for dinner tomorrow?" conversation. This was a system-wide alert. This was an unscheduled audit. She took a breath, and the words she spoke were precise, clinical, and utterly devastating. "I like you, Mark. I really, really do," she began, the preamble to a corporate downsizing. "But I'm not in love with you." The sentence didn't just hang in the air. It solidified, becoming a cold, heavy object between us. It was a punch to the gut, but a bizarrely specific one. It wasn't the clean, brutal severance of a breakup. No, this was far more insidious. This was a downgrade, a demotion. I was being moved from a senior partner to an unpaid intern, effective immediately. She was informing me of unilateral change to our terms of service, and by the placid, almost proud look on her face, she expected me to simply scroll to the bottom and click "I agree." My brain, however, isn't wired for that kind of emotional ambiguity. I'm a systems analyst. My entire life, my entire career, is built on logic, on finding inefficiencies in complex systems and making them rational, predictable, and effective. I don't deal in vague, emotionally driven nonsense. I deal in data, in clear inputs and measurable outputs. So, in the face of this emotional system crash, my mind did the only thing it knew how to do. It processed the new data. Input: Chloe likes me. Input: Chloe is not in love with me. Conclusion: the operational parameters of this relationship have been fundamentally altered. I ran the diagnostics. The emotional subroutine, labeled romantic partner, was now deprecated. A new, lower-tier subroutine, labeled roommate, or perhaps friend with residential benefits, was being proposed. Acknowledged. After a moment that felt like an eternity of silent data processing, I gave a single, curt nod. "Okay," I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "Thanks for the clarification." And that was it. There was no shouting, no desperate pleading of why. I didn't beg her to reconsider or ask what I had done wrong. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a dramatic, emotionally volatile scene. I simply accepted the new system parameters she had defined. I stood up, the springs of the couch groaning in the quiet room, and walked towards the bedroom. I could feel her eyes burning into my back, a wave of confusion and disappointment radiating from her. She had been prepared for a fight. She had rehearsed for tears, for arguments, for me to fall apart and ask what I could do to win back her love. To earn a promotion I didn't even know I had lost. She was expecting me to start working overtime for a position that had just been eliminated. She got nothing. She received only quiet, calm, logical acceptance of the new terms. Lying in bed, I stared at the blank geography of the ceiling. My phone, resting on a nightstand, buzzed. I didn't need to look at it. It was a notification from the group chat she had with her friends, a chat she had once proudly shown me on our shared living room tablet, an account that, in a massive oversight on her part, I was still logged into. I knew exactly what was happening. She was reporting the results of her field test to her board of directors, her committee of validation. She was seeking peer approval for her brave and honest emotional restructuring. A few minutes later, the bedroom door creaked open. She slipped into the room, assuming I was asleep. The mattress dipped under her weight, a familiar shift that now felt alien. The pale blue light of her phone screen cast an eerie glow on her face as I watched her through slitted eyes. I could hear the faint, rapid tapping of her thumbs against the screen. She was receiving the validation she so desperately craved. I could practically hear their replies in my head. "You're so brave for speaking your truth. That's so mature of you. Most people would just ghost him. You're inventing a new, better way to have a relationship." They were praising her for this supposedly brilliant new model she had engineered. A relationship where she could continue to enjoy all the benefits of my stability, my home, my income, my logistical support, all without the messy, inconvenient obligation of being in love. She thought she was a genius. She thought she had just successfully renegotiated our contract entirely in her favor. She had absolutely no idea that her declaration hadn't been a renegotiation at all. It had been an activation of a hidden termination clause. She hadn't just downgraded me from boyfriend to roommate. She had initiated a system-wide purge. And I was about to become the most efficient, logical, and emotionally vacant roommate she had ever had the misfortune of living with. The game was on. She had set the new rules, and I was going to follow them with brutal, unforgiving precision. Update 1. It has been a week since Chloe's brave and honest confession. A week of what she, in her naivete, probably interprets as me maturely processing my feelings and adjusting to our new dynamic. In reality, it has been the methodical, phased implementation of what I have internally designated the roommate protocol. Many of the initial comments on my situation suggested I just kick her out. That approach is flawed. It's messy, emotionally charged, and leads to unpredictable outcomes. It's a sledgehammer approach to a problem that requires a scalpel. I prefer a slow, quiet, systematic dismantling of the existing infrastructure. It's cleaner, more efficient, and infinitely more effective. Phase 1 of the protocol began the very next morning. I woke up at my usual 6 a.m. My first action for the past 2 years had been to lean over, kiss her, and whisper a good morning. That routine was now officially obsolete. Instead, I slid out of bed without a sound, went straight to the kitchen, and started the coffee maker. I brewed a full pot, poured myself a single large mug, and then carefully emptied the rest into my thermos for work. I left the empty glass pot sitting on the warming plate, a silent testament to the change. The man who made her a fresh cup of coffee every single morning, the man who knew she couldn't function without it, was in love with her. That man was gone. His operational duties had been terminated. The roommate who now shared a kitchen with her, however, had no such obligations. The roommate makes coffee only for himself. I showered, dressed, and headed for the door, tossing a neutral "have a good day" over my shoulder as I left. "No quis gouvier." No, I love you. I was polite, civil, and utterly detached, offering her the same level of warmth I'd give a coworker I happened to share an office with. For the first few days, she seemed to revel in it. She was cheerful, almost giddy with relief. The pressure was off. She had successfully friend-zoned her live-in boyfriend without sacrificing the apartment, the shared finances, or the comfortable lifestyle. She had her space. She had, in her mind, achieved the perfect outcome, getting everything she wanted with none of the emotional cost. Then, the small, systematic changes began to accumulate, creating a cascade of minor system failures on her end. On Friday afternoon, a text from her arrived. "Hey, the girls and I are thinking of trying that new Italian place tonight. Can you book us a table for 8? Around 8:30. This was standard operating procedure. I was the planner, the logistics manager of our social lives. I handled reservations, tickets, travel arrangements, and all the mental load that came with it. The boyfriend was an executive assistant. The roommate was not. I'll let the text sit for a few minutes before replying. "Sorry, I'm busy tonight. You should probably call them directly." A new place like that is usually booked up on a Friday. Her immediate reply was a single, indignant question mark. I ignored it. I was in fact busy. I was at the gym, a new addition to my evening schedule. The time I used to spend cooking her dinner or planning our weekends was now being reinvested in my own system maintenance. That weekend, the protocol escalated to phase 2. On Saturday morning, I did my laundry. Only my laundry. I meticulously separated my clothes, washed them, dried them, and folded them. Her overflowing hamper in the corner of the room went untouched. On Saturday afternoon, I went grocery shopping. I walked the aisles with a precise list, purchasing food for myself for the upcoming week. Steaks, chicken breasts, vegetables, the specific protein powder I liked. I did not buy her favorite brand of yogurt, her gluten-free bread, or the ridiculously overpriced almond milk she insisted on. The boyfriend's role included being the household's primary provider. That role was defunct. I came home, unpacked my groceries, and arranged them neatly on my designated shelves in the fridge and pantry, which I had mentally partitioned earlier. As I was slicing chicken for my meal prep, she wandered into the kitchen, a look of mild confusion on her face. "Did you go to the store?" she asked. "Yep," I replied, my focus remaining entirely on the cutting board. "You didn't get any of my stuff," she stated. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, laced with a sense of betrayal. "Oh, sorry about that," I said, finally looking up and giving her the same polite, disinterested smile I'd give a stranger who accidentally bumped into me. I just grabbed what was on my list. "Tell you what, I'll text you a picture of my receipt so you can figure out your half for the shared items, like paper towels and dish soap." The look that spread across her face was a masterpiece of shock and outrage. In 2 years, I had never once asked her to split the grocery bill. It wasn't even a consideration. But the man who happily bought all her groceries was the man who was in love with her. The roommate, her new cohabitant, pays his fair share. The cracks in her brilliant new relationship model really started to widen on Sunday. Her car had been making a strange, rattling noise for over a week. She mentioned it several times, each mention a clear and obvious prompt for me to take a look. On Sunday afternoon, she appeared in the doorway of my home office, leaning against the frame with a practiced air of helplessness. "My car is acting up again," she announced. "The noise is getting worse. I really think you should take a look at it. You know how mechanics always try to rip me off." I swiveled in my chair to face her, adopting an expression of practiced, neutral sympathy. "Wow, that sounds really stressful," I said, my tone carefully calibrated to be supportive yet utterly unhelpful. "It's always a good idea to get a few different quotes before you commit to any major repairs. Yelp is a great resource for finding reputable shops in the area. You can even filter by customer reviews." I then turned back to my computer. The universal sign for this conversation is over. She remained in the doorway for a full minute, completely silent. I could feel the sheer force of her bewildered stare as she tried to process what was happening. She was running diagnostics of her own, and every test was returning an error. The man who would have immediately stopped his work, grabbed his tools, and spent his Sunday afternoon under the hood of her car was gone. The man who had our trusted mechanic on speed dial had been laid off. Her roommate was busy with his own projects. She finally let out an exasperated huff and walked away. The beautiful, logical purity of the protocol is that I'm not being cruel or malicious. I'm being literal. She defined our relationship. She likes me. Therefore, I'm treating her precisely like someone I like, a friend, an acquaintance, a roommate. I would gladly give a friend advice on how to find a good mechanic. I would not, however, spend my entire day off fixing their car for them. The unspoken currency of an in-love relationship, the acts of service, the thoughtful gestures, the intuitive support, was no longer in circulation. She had single-handedly devalued our emotional currency to zero. I was simply adjusting the household economy to reflect its new, worthless state. She is slowly, painfully starting to realize that her brave, honest declaration didn't just free her from the burden of loving me. It freed me from the mountain of obligations that came with loving her. And she's beginning to see just how many of those obligations she had blindly, blissfully taken for granted. The silence in the apartment is growing, becoming a tangible presence. She keeps trying to initiate conversations, to bait me into an argument, to get any kind of emotional reaction, positive or negative. She gets nothing but polite, friendly, impenetrable indifference. She thought she was just taking love off the table. She's beginning to suspect, with dawning horror, that she might have accidentally cleared the entire table, plates, silverware, and all. Update 2. It has now been a full month since Chloe downgraded our relationship to a beta test. A month of the roommate protocol. And the system on her end is beginning to show signs of a catastrophic, cascading failure. What she imagined as a brilliant power move, a way to secure her position indefinitely, has metastasized into a slow, agonizing, self-inflicted wound. The relentless politeness, which she initially found so refreshing and mature, has become its own unique form of psychological torture for her. My neutrality is a constant, impenetrable wall. There are no cracks for her to exploit, no emotional footholds, no moments of weakness. I am consistently, cheerfully, and devastatingly neutral. The first major stress test of the new system occurred 2 weeks ago, her birthday. In the past, this was a major event on my calendar. I would have spent weeks planning a surprise party, a weekend getaway, or sourcing a thoughtful, expensive gift that she'd casually mentioned months earlier. I was the architect of her happiness. This year, the architect was off the clock. When I woke up on the morning of her birthday, I rolled over, saw she was awake and watching me with expectant eyes, and offered her a pleasant, friendly smile. "Happy birthday, Chloe," I said. "Hope you have a great day." Then I got out of bed and began my standard morning routine. She lay there, motionless, an expression of utter disbelief etched onto her face. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head as she tried to reconcile my benign greeting with her years of experience. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Surely, a surprise breakfast was coming. Or perhaps flowers would be delivered later in the day. There had to be a hint about a special dinner reservation I'd secretly made. Nothing. The other shoe never dropped because there was no other shoe. She finally padded into the kitchen while I was blending my morning protein shake. "So," she began, her voice straining to sound casual. "Any plans for my birthday?" I paused the blender and turned to her. "Me? No, just the usual. Work and then the gym. Did you have something planned?" Her face fell. I thought we would do something," she stammered, the uncertainty plain in her voice. "Oh," I said, feigning a look of mild, friendly realization. "I guess I just figured you'd be celebrating with your friends, the people you're really close with. I'm happy to grab a pizza and watch a movie with you tonight if you want, like we sometimes do as a friend, but I didn't want to presume you didn't have big, important plans already." The deliberate, surgical emphasis I placed on the word friend was a carefully calibrated strike. It was her logic, her own stated parameter, turned back on her like a weapon. Grand, romantic birthday celebrations are a feature of the In Love software package. The Friends Who Live Together package comes with the optional, casual offer of pizza. She spent her birthday evening sitting on the couch, sullenly scrolling through her phone as I sat beside her, working on my laptop. The silence in the room was a deafening monument to what she had lost. Her friends, the same ones who had called her so brave, had all fulfilled their social obligation by posting a "Happy Birthday, Queen" party popper on her social media, but not a single one had actually made plans with her. The financial consequences of the protocol have also begun to bite, and bite hard. It turns out the boyfriend experience subscription she had been enjoying included a significant amount of passive financial support she was either unaware of or had chosen to ignore. I used to cover our dates, our vacations, her car insurance, her phone bill. It was all just part of the shared budget of our life together. But now that shared life had been partitioned. Her cell phone was shut off last week. She came to me in a full-blown panic, holding the inert device like it was a dead pet. "My phone isn't working. I can't make any calls." I looked up from my book with mild concern. "Oh, right. I forgot to mention," I said matter-of-factly. "I took my payment card off the family plan, since we're not really a family anymore. You just have to call the provider and set up your own account under your name." Her face went stark white. She had no job. Her freelance graphic design work was sporadic at best, bringing in just enough to cover her personal shopping habits, not actual life-sustaining bills. For 2 years, she had been living a life almost entirely funded by a man who was in love with her. Now, she was just a roommate who was perilously behind on her share of the utilities. In her growing desperation, she has started trying to provoke me, to force an error in my programming. She's trying to get the old Mark back, even if it's the angry, yelling Mark. Any emotional input would be better than this sterile void. She'll leave her clothes and dishes scattered around the apartment, a mess clearly intended for me to clean up. I don't. I neatly pile her belongings on her side of the bedroom. She'll play sad, melancholic songs loudly in the living room, a transparent attempt at emotional manipulation. I'll simply put on my noise-canceling headphones and continue with my work. The biggest escalation yet came last night. She stumbled home from a night out, clearly having had a few drinks. I was in bed, reading. She came into the bedroom, wearing nothing but one of my old t-shirts, a classic move from her old playbook, one that she used to initiate intimacy. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture slumped, and began to cry, soft, theatrical sobs. "I miss you," she choked out, her voice thick with manufactured tears. "I miss us." I placed my bookmark carefully in my book, set it on the nightstand, and turned to look at her. My expression was one of mild concern, the exact same look I would give a neighbor whose dog had just run away. "It sounds like you're having a really tough time, Chloe," I said, my voice gentle but devoid of any real warmth. "It's been a big month of changes for you." Have you considered talking to a therapist? It can be really helpful to have an impartial third party to work through these kinds of feelings with. I delivered the line with perfect clinical detachment. I had taken her genuine, albeit manipulative, emotional plea and responded with a referral to a mental health professional. It was the emotional equivalent of telling someone with a compound fracture that they should probably see a doctor. It was correct. It was even, on some level, helpful. And it was completely, utterly devoid of the personal intimacy she was so desperately craving. The tears stopped instantly. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with a look of dawning, abject horror. She was finally, truly starting to understand. She wasn't dealing with a heartbroken man who was lashing out in pain. She was dealing with a system that was operating exactly as designed. She had set the parameters. She had defined the relationship. And the logical, inevitable output was this cold, sterile, and perfectly rational emptiness. She thought she was being brave and honest. She's now realizing she was just catastrophically stupid. The panic is setting in. The silence in our apartment is now louder and more eloquent than her words ever were. And the final, inevitable system crash is coming. Final update. It's over. The roommate protocol reached its logical and inevitable conclusion last night. There was no blaze of glory, no dramatic confrontation. It ended with a quiet, soul-crushing whimper. The past 2 weeks have seen Chloe's steady decline into outright desperation. The apartment, once the stage for her perfect low-effort life, had become her prison, a clean, quiet, well-maintained prison where her roommate was unfailingly polite, and the crushing silence was a constant, screaming reminder of everything she had willfully discarded. She had tried everything in her arsenal to get a rise out of me. Tears, anger, seduction, guilt trips. Every attempt was met with the same unmovable wall of friendly indifference. I was a gray rock. The breaking point arrived, as I knew it would, over the inescapable logistics of money and the future. The lease on our apartment is up at the end of next month. A few days ago, the renewal offer from our landlord arrived in the mail. I placed it, unopened, on the kitchen counter for her to see, a ticking time bomb disguised as a business envelope. Last night, I came home from the gym to find her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the lease renewal. She looked haggard, like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk about this," she said, her voice small and brittle. "Okay," I said, setting my gym bag down and opening the fridge to grab a bottle of water. "What's on your mind?" Her eyes were fixed on me, wide and fearful. "Are we going to renew the lease?" she asked, the question hanging in the air. "I'm not," I said simply, taking a long drink of water. The color drained from her face. "What? What do you mean you're not? Where are we going to live?" The we was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to reestablish a shared reality that no longer existed. "I'm not sure where you're going to live, Chloe," I said, my tone remaining even and friendly. "But I've already signed a lease on a new place, a one-bedroom, closer to my office. I move in on the 1st of the month." She just stared, speechless. I could almost hear the final support structures of her world groaning and then shattering in her mind. This wasn't a Cold War anymore. This was a formal eviction notice delivered with a smile. I had made plans for my future, logical plans based on the current data, and those plans did not include her as a variable. You're leaving me?" she stammered, the words sounding absurd and archaic even to her own ears. I feigned confusion, tilting my head slightly. "Leaving you? No. Our living arrangement is simply coming to its natural end. We're roommates, remember? And our lease is up. It's not very common for roommates to sign new leases together if one of them has found a better living situation. I found a place that's a better fit for me. I just assumed you would do the same." That's when the dam finally broke. The carefully constructed facade of the brave, honest woman speaking her truth crumbled, and the raw, terrified entitlement beneath it came pouring out. "This isn't fair," she screamed, shoving her chair back as she shot to her feet. "You're being cruel. You're punishing me. I told you I made a mistake. I told you I loved you." "No, you didn't." I corrected her calmly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "You told me you missed me. You told me you missed us. You never said you loved me. But that's irrelevant now. You told me, very clearly and deliberately, that you were not in love with me. I believed you. I accepted your terms, and I adjusted my life's operating system accordingly. I'm not punishing you, Chloe. I am respecting your honesty. But I want things to go back to the way they were," she sobbed, her body trembling. "I'm sure you do," I said, and for the first time in over a month, a hint of cold steel enter my voice. You want the man who was in love with you back. The man who cooked for you, planned surprises for you, paid for your life, and took care of your every problem. You want all of that back, but you want it without the one single thing he required in return. For you to be in love with him, too. You didn't want a partner, Chloe. You wanted a unicorn, a devoted, high-functioning service provider who required nothing. That isn't a relationship. That's a vendor agreement. And my services have been discontinued. I let the words hang in the silent room. She was looking at me, really looking at me, and finally understanding. This wasn't a game she could win. This was a final, irreversible system shutdown. Then, for the grand finale, I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a small black velvet box that had been delivered that afternoon. It had been sitting there all day, another piece of bait. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, immediately lit up with a wild, desperate, and utterly delusional hope. Even now, after everything, she still possessed the breathtaking arrogance to think this was it. The grand gesture, the proof that I was secretly in love with her all along, that this was all just a test. She watched, breathless, as I slowly opened the box. It wasn't a ring. It was a key. A single, shiny, newly cut key on a simple metal ring. This is the key to my new apartment, I said, holding it up for her to see. I'm really excited about it. It's had a great view of the city. The hope in her eyes didn't just die. It was violently extinguished, replaced by a look of such profound and utter defeat that it was almost hard to watch. Almost. She had gambled her entire life on the belief that my love for her was an unconditional, infinite resource that she could turn on and off at her convenience. She had just found out, in the cruelest way possible, that it came with one very simple, non-negotiable condition. It had to be returned. She didn't say another word. She just sank back in her chair, her gaze falling to the lease renewal on the table. A piece of paper that was now her problem, and her problem alone. I left her there, stewing in the wreckage of her own creation, and went into my office to work. The silence that filled the apartment wasn't loud or oppressive anymore. It was just empty. I have 30 days left as her roommate. 30 days of polite nods and shared counter space. And then, I'm free. She got exactly what she said she wanted, a life with a man who isn't in love with her.